Hello everyone, it's Kale here, Kalecgoose. I am going to be going over how to price check all of your items in PoE. It's a very, very confusing thing for a lot of players, especially newer players who have no idea how the trade system works, or affixes, or, you know, anything in that regard. And the first thing I want to go over is the almost required tools for the job of price checking. So you want to make sure that you have Awakened PoE Trade. It basically lets you price check any item. So if you hit Control D, it brings up the item, whether or not it's corrupted, and then the actual stats that you can check. So right now it's only checking for Jewel, but if I click this, it'll bring up, you know, a different thing. If I click this, it'll bring up a different thing for all the listings that are similar to this, etc. The trade site, the official Path of Exile trade site, is the one that I highly recommend using. It is made by the actual GGG team, so it's maintained by them. There's no weird ads. There's no third party to go between. I just highly recommend using the official trade site. And then PoE Ninja can also be pretty helpful, as well as, forgot to mention it, PoE Ant Query helps you see the prices of items in past leagues to compare them to now. These will all be linked in the description, but basically this will let you check the price of different currencies. Blessing of Chayula is 23 Chaos. Divine Orbs are 22. It's also good for, I guess, checking like Scarabs, Watchstones. You can check for specific uniques. Like, let's say I wanted to check for an Intuitive Leap. It would tell me on here it's 184C, which is, it also gives you the conversion rate 1.54x. So things like that are incredibly helpful, having the outside tools available to you. Make sure that you're not just trying to go it alone and just be very confused by everything in the game. There's a lot of websites. So I wanted to start off with base types and influences. So the first thing is to check if your item is good. Is going to be, is it on a usable base? A lot of the bases in this game are really bad in the end game, but okay very, very early on. So take, for example, this studded belt. The likelihood of you seeing somebody in the end game using a studded belt that's not a unique is incredibly low, actually. Very, very, very low, because it is a bad base. The implicit is not worth your time to use. Stun duration on enemies is bad. So normally you wouldn't really, like, this would have inherently less value than a leather belt, which has life as the implicit, right? The next thing is going to be the influences. Certain slots of gear are much better suited to have different influences. Like in the past, having a Crusader chest piece was worth a lot after a certain eye level because you could get the Explode mod on it. That is a very good thing to have for a lot of builds, and so it was very sought after, so it was worth a lot more than it is now. You can have like Shaper weapons, Crusader, you can have, you know, Redeemers. All of those are all very strong. You want to make sure that you check for them, and the way you do that is the button here. So you can check the base by clicking this button at the top. It's interactable. It'll change it from normal belt to leather belt and then Shaper, which I don't know if it'll make a difference because there's probably a lot of them listed, but goes up to 4 chaos pretty quick, whereas this one just stays 1, 2, 3. Having different bases can make the world of a difference. The next thing, after you check the base type and the item level, is the item level, rather. So the base type and the influence are very important, but you also want to make sure that you have the item level checked, because the difference in item level can make the difference between rolling different modifier tiers, which is really important in the in-game for characters that are progressing to where they need more and more life and more res for the content relative to what they're doing, right? After you check those 3 things, you want to make sure that you're checking for very important mods. So on this belt, you'll see that it has 7 fire res, which is atrocious. That is something you would want maybe for a level 5 character, right? That is incredibly low, really useless to characters in the in-game, so you wouldn't want to check that. However, it does have T2 lightning res, and it has cast speed during any flask effect, which could make it significantly more valuable. It's going to be kind of diluted because it's a rare item with mods that are probably pretty common if I were to actually price check it right now. But in conjunction with other modifiers, this thing could be worth a lot, especially if it had a higher tier of life as the implicit. The next thing on here would be the tiers, of the modifiers, like I was just mentioning, is very important. So this has tier 8 life, which means that inherently it's really not that valuable, because you can start getting tier 8 life at drop level like 15 or something. It's really, really low. It's in Act 2 when you can start getting 22 life on belts. The hidden button. I don't know which... Okay, so this right here, there's a little toggle for hidden, and it'll show you modifiers that normally wouldn't be shown, which can be important for very, very niche situations for trading. It's just something to keep an eye out for if you feel like you're checking all of the boxes, but something's not adding up and you think the item might be worth more. Check under the hidden modifiers. Another thing is variations, including like synthesis. So on a nebulous, every nebulous that drops always rolls with different implicits. So you can find them with spell damage, you can find them with cold damage, percentage increased armor, energy shield. It can have anything. So you want to make sure that if you're price checking something, you're checking for the valuable things on that item. And synthesis items, just like my helmet here, are very, very, very important to check for, because that can make the item worth far more. So this right here has crit chance for spells and global crit strike multi, which are both very, very strong for my specific build. And so if we were to check for those on here, there's actually none listed. Okay, so online and offline. This makes the difference between 100x and, let's see, 1, right? So you want to make sure that you check these. You can even reduce the rolls by using the slider bar, which is very important. You want to make sure that you have these minimized, or you want the number to be somewhere around your item. You don't want to be checking for 90 life if your item has 50, right? You want to make sure that the items are similar in value. So this might make it worth far less, right? But it's actually apparently not worth anything because there's none listed. Implicit corruptions. So corruption implicits on items can make them worth far more or far less, depending upon the item. Like my headhunter here has percentage increased dex and int, which makes it go from a normal corrupted headhunter being listed for 70 to 74x, maybe 75, to percent int is worth, I don't think it would ever sell for a mirror. However, that is what people have had it listed at for the entirety of the league. So this will make sure that it checks online and offline. So this guy has it listed for 85x. This guy has it listed for 100. So it could increase the value by a significant margin. So you want to be checking for that, especially on things that can be corrupted multiple times, such as Hands of the High Templar. So this item can be modified while corrupted, which means that it can get more than 1 or 2 implicits. It can get up to 5, which means that it can be worth quite a lot. Another thing to check for when price checking, I don't mean to jump around too fast, is white sockets. So you'll see that it immediately brings these up for 20, 30, and 40x. And that is because the white sockets here are checked. But if I bring it down, they're definitely worth 1 to 2 until you actually check some modifiers on here. You want to make sure that you have this box unchecked, because white sockets don't really mean much until you are making your own character in the very end game. You don't really care about buying them on an item unless it's really hard to get all the off colors. In which case, you would definitely want to check this. The next thing is going to be item with different mods per drop. Sort of like the synthesis on this, how the synthesized fires are always changed. There are jewels, such as the one called Split Personality, that always drops with different modifiers on it. So if I go to Split Personality on the trade site here, and I full screen this, these are worth with dex and armor like 7C. However, if we sort by price backwards, having ones with intelligence and, let's see if there's another one. There's no intelligence ES ones. Ones with intelligence and energy shield on them are worth about 15 to 20x, whereas the other variations can be worth 5C, right? Rolls. So things like the Venter's Gamble, which can roll negative rolls on resistances and quantity and rarity and things like that. You want to make sure that you are checking for really, really high rolls or really, really low rolls if there's a large variation that can be present. And then the last thing is sockets, links, and socket colors. So a lot of items, like chevrons, same thing, are really hard to get off colors on, but can be used a lot in builds that need off colors. And so having more white sockets on them can be very beneficial, but so can having an item that drops with, if this had, let's say, 5 green and like a red, right? That could be used for a specific cast on crit type build or something of that nature. And that would make it worth far more. And the way you check that is not available on Awaken PoE Trade. So what we would do is go to the normal PoE Trade site, and you could type in Chevron's wrappings here. Go to socket filters, and then let's say you had 4 green, 1 blue, 1 red. You can check if there is any listed for that, and it would probably be worth far more than a normal 6-link Chevs. Because a lot of builds require those off colors for things like this. And then the last thing is basically spending more time and getting more practice and playing more, and price checking more items. You'll get to have a more base understanding of how to check the price of different modifiers and figure out what's important. You'll realize like, oh, hey, this sounded really good in my head like a week ago, but now like I noticed that it's inflating all the prices of the items that aren't worth that much, so maybe it's not that great of a modifier. This is especially important when looking at jewels. Like, increased damage with axes sounds good, but in reality, probably not. That's pretty much the whole thing. If I missed anything, let me know. I'm just trying to make sure that, you know, there are resources available for newer players and players struggling with pricing things in general. There will be more YouTube content coming soon for guides and things of this nature. So just, you know, keep an eye out, sub, like, do what you can, join Discord. I'm live on Twitch every day. Kalecgoose on Twitch will probably be linked in the description. So will the 4 resources that I mentioned: PoE Ant Query, Awaken PoE Trade, the actual PoE Trade site, and then PoE Ninja as well. So Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in stream. Peace.